Hello everyone. This is our weekly update for week 3 of the course. And in this update, I'm just going to go over a little information about the assignments that you completed this week and give you a heads up about what's coming up this week. The first assignment that you had to complete for me was the Browsing Communication Research assignment. A number of people did not complete this assignment, so just a heads up on that. It's very important that you're doing all of the assignments regularly if you want to have a good grade in the course. So be on the lookout and make sure you're preparing in advance. Almost every week you will have an assignment due on Sunday, at least one, so just make sure you have it on your radar. A couple of quick things to know about this assignment is I didn't grade people down for having incorrect APA citations, but I did mention when there were mistakes, and just so you know, it's important where you can see my comments is they actually will exist in little bubbles right on the assignment as you uploaded it. So if you want to see my comments, you need to go where you uploaded the assignment, click on the assignment, and you'll see little comment bubbles throughout the assignment, and then you can see the information I have there. If you have any problems with this, please let me know and we'll get it figured out now. So eventually we'll cover APA citations in more depth in this class, and then I will start grading you on those. So if they're incorrect, it will cost you some points. Right now that isn't the case, but I'm letting you know if you did it incorrectly. The other, one of the other important things that I wanted you to get from this assignment was just the practice of locating an article by looking for the journal title in the library. So if that's not how you found the articles in this assignment, I suggest you make sure you know this information. So there was a video attached with this assignment that could give you some directions on how to do that. If you found the articles in another way, just by using a database or by using Google, I recommend that you go back and watch that video so that you know how to do this in the future when you're asked to in this class or in another course. It's really useful. Overall, I think people highlighted really important things about the articles in general, and were able to kind of get from the exercise what I was hoping you would get. One is just a recognition of the kinds of topics that are published in communication studies. What are researchers studying? And people noted they're studying a lot of different kinds of things. There's a very broad array of topics that are discussed. They oftentimes focus on problems or contemporary issues. So usually you can find something you're really interested in within the articles. As one student mentioned, the word research sounds kind of boring, but when you look at what people are actually doing research on, oftentimes it's things you might be very interested in. People noted that they are very detailed. The articles seem very detailed and complex. There's a lot of analysis, and they offer a very in-depth perspective on the topics rather than just a surface perspective. And that's a really important thing to pay attention to in terms of scholarly research. This is one of the biggest difference between a scholarly article and, say, a newspaper article, something we'll talk more about next week. And then people noticed that a lot of them dealt with media or social media, and that's true, and it's true for all communication scholars, not just those who study media. In public relations, in communication and culture, media is going to be a central, and social media is going to be central aspects of topics that people will study. Of course, there's a lot of references. This is one of the ways you can tell if you have a scholarly article that you're using in a paper. Are they citing at least 10 other people? If there's less than that, then it might not be a scholarly article. We'll talk more about these references and why they're there and how they get used as part of your literature review, which is what you'll be working on for me in this course. And then, as people noted, these articles weren't just like a newspaper article where people sort of gave an overview of what happened. In these articles, people were conducting their own original research. That means they were either collecting their own data or they were constructing their own argument or theory. And this is one of the reasons why these kind of articles oftentimes get referred to as primary sources. Generally, people did quite well on the unit test. I hope you found it to be pretty easy. I think you should go back over and see what you missed. If you've missed a lot of questions, it might suggest that you're not looking over the material carefully enough or at all. So make sure that you're prepping. In the future, the tests will be a little more difficult because they'll cover material a little bit more specifically. Most people did quite well. There were just a few questions I wanted to draw your attention to because some people missed these. And the first one is one that most people got right, but it was concerning that anyone would miss it. It asked, all of the following are myths about online courses except. You do need to, it is a myth that there's little participation. Hopefully you've already noticed that we use discussion in this class, and that requires active participation, as well as just engagement with me when you have questions or concerns is a really important part of being successful. You may or may not end up feeling that this is the case, but I think sometimes students think that online courses are going to be easier and find that that's not really true. And then, of course, you can't do all of the work whenever you want. There are deadlines in the course, and you need to be cognizant of these and making sure you're meeting those. This is a myth, however, because you should be checking into Blackboard many times throughout the week if you want to be successful. In this class, you need to check in 3 times during the week to make sure you're completing assignments when they need to be completed. I brought this question up too just because a lot of people miss this. I think that I can understand why people missed it because on its face value, it seems, of course, that the research topics and communication studies would be very different. But one of the things that was mentioned in the PowerPoint is how, interestingly, many of the topics have stayed the same. So even though we have social media, the idea of studying media and media technologies as a central part of communication has remained the same. So just make sure you're really paying close attention to some of those nuanced aspects of the material. The last thing I want to talk about is the group discussion. There were a few little glitches along the way, but overall I thought it went well, and people had interesting things to say about fake news, and it was a good start to a conversation. One thing you'll notice this week when you get into your first literature review assignment is that this idea of fake news is going to be a broad umbrella under which you need to choose a research topic. So fake news is like the broad topic that we're going to have for our class overall. And when you pick a research topic, you'll need to think about one that fits in relationship to this idea of fake news. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. So many of the examples I use in class and some of the readings that we'll do collectively will be ones that are focused on that idea of fake news. So a couple of quick things about the group discussion. I'm going to change the due dates just a little bit. One student had recommended this. It makes a lot of sense. I probably should have done it in the beginning, but prior leaders and respondents both had to post by Thursday. This did not leave a lot of time for respondents, especially if leaders weren't posting till later in the night. So I've changed just this, that leaders need to post by Thursday. Respondents, you will have until midnight on Friday to respond to these. This still means that you should be checking in 3 times a week, but you need to pay attention to whether you're a leader. Check the schedule, the weekly schedule and the calendar to see when you're a leader. On those days, make sure you're checking in by Thursday to post your response. Everyone else who's a respondent, you can make sure you're logging in by Friday. Know if you're a respondent or a leader and follow those directions. That will be important. Hopefully after this first one, it kind of makes sense to you. You won't have any issues, but if you have questions, please just get a hold of me. I think that's all. And then I wanted to just talk about a little bit about some of the things that came up. Like I said, I thought that there were some interesting discussions. Some people have really brought up that, I mean, the question itself asked you to think about generations to some extent. How young kids, can they accurately tell fake from real news, evaluate it? I think this is interesting because I think that initially when researchers first started studying fake news, they really did think about it as something that young kids fell for. But as research has progressed in this area, they're actually finding out that's not really the case, and it may very well be older generations that are more likely to be spreading fake news and fake news stories, and less likely to be able to discern between accurate and online information and inaccurate online information. So I bring that up in part because I think it's an interesting assumption that is being made in this research study, and that is true of a lot of research, that researchers, like anybody else, sometimes make assumptions, and that can shape what they do. So it's always really important to stop and ask that question. Is that fair? Is that accurate? Are there assumptions that are shaping this work? A number of the discussion leaders really did point our attention to that and say, like, either why is it young kids, or are there issues with older generations as well? That was a really good direction to take that in. A number of other people brought up the issue of bias, how bias is not quite the same as fake news. It differs slightly. That's very true, and an important thing to keep in mind as we develop this topic of fake news more in this class. Bias can be hard to determine and discern. There is a chart I've seen running around on the internet, like making its rounds on the internet. And this chart draws our attention to this idea of bias. So even some sources that may be giving us accurate information, we can ask questions about, but is that accurate information sort of interpreted in a particular way? So this chart draws our attention to that issue. There's a lot of different versions of this going around, and there's discussion about the chart itself. Is this a fair analysis of how we should make sense of this? Regardless of its sort of accuracy or the fact that it could be up for debate, I think it presents a nice picture of one more level of thinking about what do we mean by maybe not fake news, but false information, quality information, is this question of bias. The last thing is, a number of people brought up the question of Wikipedia. Is it a good source? And I hear a lot of discussion about how it's not. I just want to kind of draw your attention to, I actually think Wikipedia is a great source, but it's a source that you have to use in specific kinds of ways. So would you cite it in an academic paper you're writing for a professor? Probably not. But would you use it in a research process? And would you use it to get good information for learning more about a topic? Yes, 100%. So this week in particular, we're moving our attention to different types of sources, how you might use those and how you might evaluate them. And this idea of Wikipedia will come into play specifically when we talk about reference sources. So pay attention to that. So looking ahead this week, you have a few things coming up that are due. You have another group discussion. Make sure you're paying attention to who the leaders are. They need to post by Thursday, respondents by Friday. This will be a scavenger hunt, so you'll watch a number of videos that give you more information about how to find sources that you want, and then we'll see how well you do with that. You have another assignment. It'll take about an hour to complete. It's due on Sunday, all about different types of sources that you'll get introduced to this week. And then you have your first literature review assignment, which asks you for just a paragraph about a topic you might be interested in. Like I said, keep in mind this has to be related to fake news. It will help you a lot to watch the video that is posted with those assignment guidelines. All right, good luck, and I'm looking forward to the week ahead. If you have any questions, please get a hold of me.